Hello, I want to tell you about my recent trip to Sri Lanka. My name is Ken Chapman, and I'm the evangelist at the South Bumby Church of Christ. And most likely, if you're watching this video, you had a part to play in that trip. You either help financially support that trip, or you offered prayers or well wishes on that trip. And so I just wanted to share this video by way of a report of the work that we did. We were there for a little over 2 weeks, and the purpose of this trip was for the gospel's sake. We spent time working with the preachers on the island, um, teaching them, encouraging them, edifying them, and then as well as going to 6 different cities and working with the brethren in each of those locations. And so, as you can see on the map here, this is the island of Sri Lanka, small nation island off the southern coast of India. Beautiful country, beautiful people. But as you can also tell from this map, it's a long way from home. And so that's where we'll start. I just want to talk to you about the trip itself. It seems a little counterintuitive, but I was able to get a much cheaper flight and better flight by actually flying from Orlando to Houston. And so that was about a 2.5 hour flight from Orlando International Airport to the George Bush Intercontinental Airport. It was there in Houston that I met my traveling companion, Ed Brand. Ed is the reason that I've started going to Sri Lanka, and I've gone with him every trip that I've taken there. I appreciate so much the work that Ed does in the preaching of the gospel, both here in America. He spends about half the year overseas in a lot of different places in addition to Sri Lanka. And I've just grown to respect and appreciate Ed and the work that he does so much. So I met Ed. We got on the plane there, left from Houston, and flew to our first stop in Dubai. That was just a little under a 16-hour flight from Houston to Dubai. If you've never taken a long flight like that, there's no way to really convey to you just how long that is. Time goes by slower on an airplane, I'm convinced. But we made a good safe travel there. Was able to sleep a little bit on the plane, and otherwise read, keep ourselves entertained. And then from Dubai, we had to make another stop to the country of Maldives, the city of Mali. That was about a 4-hour flight from Dubai to Mali. The unfortunate thing is the flight was 4 hours, but our layover was about 6 hours in Mali. The airport's very small, not a lot to see and do in the airport. And so I convinced Ed to leave the airport and just do a walking tour of the city of Mali. But unfortunately, it was raining. And so we did a walking tour in the rain. For several hours and several miles. But then we flew from Mali to our destination of Colombo, Sri Lanka. That was a short flight, just about an hour and a half. But we finally made it to our destination on Wednesday night. We left Monday at about 2 p.m. Now, the times I'm telling you here are all local Orlando times, Eastern time in the United States. I left Monday from Orlando at about 2 p.m. and would have arrived at your time Wednesday at 9 a.m. Now there's a 9.5 hour time difference. And so I'll let you do the math as what time it was, but it was Wednesday evening for us when we arrived in Colombo. And then we went from there, Ed and I, straight to our hotel, spent the night, Wednesday night, and then got up ready to make the trip further into the island. Like I said, we spent the night in a hotel near Colombo. There's Ed, you can see in kind of that peach pink colored shirt there in the foreground. And then also traveling companions, we met in Colombo, one of our shepherds, Walcott Steele, that's him in the middle, and his son Jamari, there's on the right-hand side of your screen. Walcott and Jamari were with us for about half of the trip. I'll tell you when they departed from us, but it was certainly good to have them with us. They were helpful in our journeys and in the work that we did there. And it was good just to introduce them to the island and to the people and the brethren there in Sri Lanka. So we spent the night there in outside of Colombo. This was us at breakfast that next morning. And after breakfast, we made our way over deeper into the island. Before I get any further, I want to introduce you to my good friend, fellow preacher, my interpreter, my traveling companion, Joe. Could not make these trips without Joe. Joe goes with me wherever I go. He's, like I said, he's my interpreter because they speak two languages primarily in Sri Lanka, Sinhalese and Tamil. Joe speaks Sinhalese, the most prominent of the languages, but Joe's very good in English, and so he's able to interpret for me, not just in my preaching and my teaching, but just when we go to the train station, the bus station, just to the store, wherever we need to go. Joe is there. Joe works in Hindala, which is a suburb of Colombo, where the airport is. And again, Joe is with me throughout this trip, and I appreciate so much the work that he does, helping me, but most importantly, the work that he does in the kingdom. And so the next day we traveled from Colombo to Nuwara Eliya. That's about 100-mile journey. Again, it's a small island, but that 100 miles took us about 5.5, maybe 6 hours in a van that we rented. And so we all loaded up in that van, loaded up with our luggage, and made that journey from Colombo to Nuwara Eliya. Now, on this 2D map, it doesn't show the change in elevation, but Colombo on the coast, the western coast of Sri Lanka, is 3 feet above sea level. And then we traveled up to Nuwara Eliya. Nuwara Eliya is over 6,000 feet above sea level. To give you a perspective, that's about 1,000 feet higher than the city of Denver, which is known as the Mile High City. And so we're just constantly going uphill as we go inland to the city of Nuwara Eliya. Colombo, most of the places that we visit in Sri Lanka has a very hot and humid climate, much like what we experience here in Orlando, a little bit hotter, a little bit more humid, but very similar to what we experience here in Orlando in the summers. But when you go up to Nuwara Eliya, because of that change in elevation, the temperature drops. It's much cooler. And so the time that we were there, it wasn't that bad. The time we were there, it'd get into the 50s, maybe the lower 50s. And so makes Nuwara Eliya and this section of Sri Lanka very different than the rest of what we experience on that island. Here's a shot from the van ride. That's Joe in the passenger seat, and then our driver, of course, in the driver's seat. And this is just part of our van ride from Colombo to Nuwara Eliya. Like I said, it took most of the day on Thursday, 5.5, maybe 6 hours to make that trip. And the purpose of the trip to Nuwara Eliya is this is where we, every time we've gone, have engaged in preacher studies. We invite all of the preachers that we're aware of on the island to come meet us there in Nuwara Eliya. We pay for their transportation. We pay for their room and board to come and study with us in kind of this central, more pleasant, climate-wise location. Pictured here, of course, you can see Walcott and Jamari, and then Ed, the 3 Americans in the foreground. And then we have Joe and Sager and Nagendran and Ram, Eric and Sarath. Missing from our studies here were Uraj. I'll talk more about Uraj later. Uraj wasn't able to make the trip. And then Mohan. It was unfortunate. Mohan actually lives there in Nuwara Eliya, but Mohan was in the hospital the whole time that we were there. And so, of course, he was unable to make the trip and study with us. But we missed those brethren. I got to see you, Raj. I got to communicate with Mohan, but wasn't able to spend any time with him because of the sickness that he was suffering with. But we had 2 full good days of studies. In times past, we've had longer studies, but this trip just didn't allow for that. But we had 2 long days of studies with these good brethren. Ed and I kind of tag team, take turns talking. We talked about the church, kind of the work of the church, the distinction between the universal and local church, and just different concepts surrounding the New Testament church and what it is and what it is to be in both Sri Lanka and in America. And so it was good to be with these brethren. And again, to encourage them, hopefully to help them in their respective works there on the island. I want to show you this picture. Every study, every visit, everything must include a tea break. Sri Lanka is known for its tea. The best tea in the world is grown here in Sri Lanka. They're one of the major producers of tea, exporters of tea. And this is the way they drink their tea, what we would call milk tea, milk and a lot of sugar in their tea, and usually some homemade snack, a cookie kind of thing that they would offer with the tea. And so the place where we were renting and meeting, they provided this tea for our tea break. And so every day, everything's got to stop for that tea break. We ended up having to stay in 2 hotel rooms in New Aurelia. We extended our stay there because of Mohan's sickness. We were planning on going and worshiping where he preaches in Mascalia, but since he wasn't going to be there, we made other plans. And so we extended our stay in New Aurelia by 1 night. This is the view from the second hotel room. I can kind of see some of the mountains. The clouds are almost ever present in New Aurelia. It's just as humid as it is in the hot places on the coast, but a cool, damp humidity that is there. Just going to show you some pictures of just some of the beauty of the island. This is the first place that we stayed. Ed and I, this little place here just had 2 rooms, one for Ed and one for me. And beautiful on the outside, a little bit bare on the inside, is for what we would expect for hotel accommodations in America, but it was suitable for us, and they were good to us there in New Aurelia. Here's another view from that second room that we stayed in, a much higher floor. And you can see the kind of some of the houses and businesses there that you can see from our view. Now, this is a view. I'm going to play you a video here. The predominant religions in Sri Lanka are Buddhist and Hindu, but they do have a good population of Muslims. And so right outside my hotel room was a mosque. And if you're familiar with the Islam religion and mosque, they're going to have the call to prayers. And so this was my wake-up call every morning. At about 4 o'clock in the morning, they do the call for prayers. And so was my wake-up call. All right. So that's you. Again, that was my alarm clock every morning at 4 o'clock. And what you can't hear there is there's a good population of Muslims, as I said, in the city of New Aurelia and really throughout the island. But the dog population in New Aurelia was not Muslim. And so they were howling in protest at being woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and just added to that volume. Here, many of the meals that I eat there I'm a bit of a chicken when it comes to eating overseas. And so many of the meals are often food that I brought from home. And this was kind of a typical breakfast that I would have in my room. I brought my own coffee maker, coffee cup. And so I would brew myself some coffee, have some kind of breakfast bar. And I invented the breakfast bar peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And so I'd get my strawberry breakfast bars, smear some peanut butter on it, drink my coffee, and we would call that breakfast. I'll show you a little bit later. We didn't always do that. We would eat in some of the restaurants and hotels, but I just wanted to kind of show you most time my supper was ramen noodles in my hotel room. I would boil the water in my coffee pot and pour it over the ramen noodles and eat a bowl of ramen noodles and a couple Slim Jims to get some protein. And so many times meals, breakfast, lunch, or supper are just going to be in the hotel room. Not always, but many times. So now, after our studies in New Orleans, myself, Walcott, Jamari, and Joe made our way to Yadiyantota. We split up from Ed here. We find many times that our work and time is more efficient and effective if we split up. And so Ed stayed there in New Orleans, made trips to Badula in that region, while Walcott, Jamari, Joe, and I split up and made our way to Yadiyantota. We did this Sunday morning and was able to arrive. It's about a 65-mile journey. And Yadiyantota is a small village. It's not on this map, but I have the location indicated there. About 65 miles away from New Orleans. Took us about 3 hours to make that trip on Sunday morning. We were able to arrive in time for worship services on that Sunday. Beautiful scenery. Most of our sightseeing is done just on the trips in between our locations. A beautiful van ride from New Orleans to Yadiyantota through these mountains. You can see in the foreground there, that's some tea. It's part of a tea plantation. The tea is being grown, and they harvest that on a regular basis. Here's Devon Falls, one of the waterfalls that we passed by on our way to Yadiyantota. Just beautiful scenery. It's a beautiful country. And so we made it, as I said, we made it to Yadiyantota in time for Sunday services. This is Uraj. I mentioned that Uraj was not able to make it to our preacher study in New Orleans. This is Uraj, who preaches for the church in Yadiyantota. I've been there before. Their church building had been largely upgraded from when I was there before. They were able to paint and add some things. Still no air conditioning, no padded pews, but still I was tickled to be able to see that their building was in much better shape than it had been when I'd been there previously. This is Uraj making some introductory comments. Here's some of the young ladies. They treat you like royalty when you're there. Just wonderful, kind, giving people. And these young ladies are ready to present the four of us with leis. And so they put these leis around our neck as just a symbol of honor and respect. And so just wonderful people, and their kindness and generosity is shown in so many ways. Here I am standing before the congregation. I believe Jamari took this picture from the rear of the auditorium. That is Joe on one side of me. He's also wearing the lei. And then Uraj, who preaches there. I told you about the two languages, and this congregation has people who speak Sinhalese, and some of the people are more fluent in Tamil. And so I would speak in English. Joe would translate into Sinhalese, and then Uraj would translate into Tamil. And so makes for kind of a slow process in the speaking and preaching. But we had pretty good system there. In fact, here's a video that Jamari recorded for me. It's just kind of the introduction to the sermon, but I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what that was like. Well, I thought I would. No, I'm sorry. I thought I had a video there, but I must have messed that up. But anyway, just the different translations on that Sunday service. We spoke 3 times on Sunday, and so they were eager to hear the word, and it was our blessing to be there. As I said, Yadiantota is a small village. We had to travel pretty far outside the village to be able to get a room to stay at. But again, just a beautiful view from our room. Well, let me back up a little bit and show you. This is Uraj, his wife, and 3 of his children. One of his children is away at school, and so she wasn't there. But Uraj, a good man, again, preaches the gospel there in Yadiantota. And it was a pleasure to be able to be with him and to help in the work that he's doing there. Here's another view from our room in Yadiantota, or outside Yadiantota. Monkeys are everywhere in this part of the country, Yadiantota north to Kandy, where we'll go next. And so little small monkeys, and again, they are everywhere. And this one's actually on the roof of the room that I stayed in. And that was just one of them. There were many of them that were there. I showed you my own homemade breakfast. Here's a typical breakfast in Sri Lanka. It's a little bit of a mixture between what they would call an English breakfast and a Sri Lankan breakfast. Got a little bit of the sausage and the omelet, which is the English part of it, and the string hoppers, the curry chicken, the naan bread, and there that kind of represents the Sri Lankan side of the breakfast. Good food, very spicy food, so you have to be careful, or I do at least, with the spices there. But that was a good breakfast that we enjoyed. Then from Yadiantota, we traveled to Kandy. Again, it was myself, Walcott, Jamari, Joe, and Uraj traveled with us. Uraj, again, is the preacher there in Yadiantota, but Uraj has done some work in Kandy. He has some family in Kandy. And so we made the trip up to Kandy, and I'll tell you a little bit later why we did that. Again, just beautiful scenery outside. These are just pictures that we took through the window of the van as we're traveling. It's about 52 miles from Yadiantota to Kandy. It took us about 2.5 hours. Again, just some beautiful scenery. A little mountain in the background there is actually known as Bible Mountain, Joe told me. Probably named when the English had colonized the island of Sri Lanka. It was known as Ceylon back then. And I'm guessing that's probably when this was named Bible Mountain. There's another picture of Bible Mountain in the background as we made our journey from Yadiantota to Kandy, and another picture of that scenery. Again, just beautiful, beautiful. This is kind of a typical scene that you see on the roadside, somebody selling fruits or vegetables along the way. Because of the climate, easy to grow things there, a lot of fruit. And so people are often set up on the side of the road selling their fruit. Here's where we stayed in Kandy. It's called the Queen's Hotel in Kandy. It was built in 1884 and was last updated in 1889. And so looks beautiful, and it is. It's a nice place, but the furnishings and everything on the inside certainly speak to the fact that it was built in the 1800s. But it was in a convenient location, and it worked out good for us. Here's Walcott and Chamari buying some fruit on the street in Kandy. Again, a common sight, common scene to see these little booths or huts set up somewhere selling fruit. One of the good things about that is being able to find the good, very good fresh fruit and some different kinds of fruit when we are there. But now here's the reason that we went to Kandy. Here's the people that we met with. That's Uraj seated there wearing the glasses. Again, he's a preacher in Yadiantota. He has friends and family here in Kandy. He went with us. This is a church that meets in a home. That's very common there, but it's actually a Pentecostal church. Uraj was converted out of the Pentecostal church several years ago, and he is working to convert these people as well. And so we were invited to come up and have 2 days worth of studies with the people there in Kandy. They were very attentive to our studies. We talked about miracles in the Bible versus so-called miracles today. We talked about what you need to do in order to become a Christian. And I said they were very attentive, full of questions. We had to, again, communicate through translation, but full of questions. And it even made the comment that they had never studied these things before this way and had come to a fuller understanding. And so be praying for the continued efforts of Uraj as he makes these trips up to Kandy because of the seed that is being sown there and the work that he is doing and we were able to do with him. As I said, our trips between these cities, we stayed in 8 hotels, 6 different cities. We get to do sightseeing just from the van seat or the car seat or the bus or train seat. Get to see some beautiful scenery. That's usually the extent of our kind of tourist things and sightseeing that way. But while we were in Kandy, we had a little bit of downtime and we were able to do a kind of a touristy kind of thing. And when there's no tuk-tuks in Sri Lanka, you can ride on an elephant. And that's, of course, that's me and Joe, a good friend and translator, riding on the back of that elephant with us. He took a little trip on that elephant. Here's Walcott and Jamari riding the elephants with us. It's not a comfortable ride by any stretch of the imagination, but it was fun. It was a nice little thing. We spent just a little bit of time doing that. Oops. This is another common scene is to be able to stop and get drink from what's called a king coconut. They just cut the top of that king coconut off and you drink the water from inside it. Good kind of refreshing roadside drink. And so we were able to do that. That's just kind of one of those things you got to do when you're in Sri Lanka. And this next picture is a little bit silly, but I want to share it with you. The exchange rate, they use the Sri Lankan rupees is their currency. And the exchange rate when we were there is like $1 equals about 320 Sri Lankan rupees. And so it can make you feel pretty rich when you're there. We pay most things by cash, our hotel rooms, the van rides that we take, everything that we do. And so we have to go and exchange our money for again, what looks like a whole lot of money, but it's not. That probably there, I'm just guessing, maybe is about $200, maybe $300, but about $200 worth of Sri Lankan rupees there. Maybe actually less than that now that I'm looking at it, but just kind of want to share that with you, just as a silly thing. All right, so after a few days of studies in Kandy, on Wednesday morning, we set out and traveled south to Mathura. Mathura is about 160 miles south of Kandy. Took about 4.5 hours to make that journey south to the southern coast of Mathura. I've been to Mathura a few times. This is where we stayed in Mathura. Oh, by the way, let me back up here. In Kandy, Walcott and Jamari, who traveled with us, that's where we parted ways. They took a train from Kandy back to Colombo and then flew out from there back to the States. And so we said our goodbyes to them at the train station, dropped them off, and then we made that trip. But again, I was so grateful to have Jamari and Walcott with me. They were an asset to our travels and our work there. And I was just glad they were able to come and go with us. If you'd like to make one of these trips, just reach out to me. Be glad to introduce you to you. Now, I'll warn you, it's rough. It's a long travel over there. It's Sri Lanka is a third world country. Living conditions are a little rough. We tried to take it easy on Walcott and Jamari, but they were introduced to that beautiful island and those wonderful people. And so when we set off for Matra, it's just now Joe and myself. Ed is still doing his work, another place in the island. Walcott and Jamari have headed back to Colombo and then eventually back to the States. And so just Joe and I make this about 150, 160 mile, 4.5 hour trip south to Matra. This kind of a typical hotel room. They're clean. Air conditioning, not as good as you might want it to be, but decent accommodations. Not the best mattress you've ever slept on, but it was all right. We were comfortable the whole time that we were there. We had 2 days of studies in Mathura. Grown to just love the brethren there. Again, have worked with them every time we've made this trip. And so this is some of the people that were there. We weren't able to be there on a Sunday, but they came out for 2 days worth of studies. This is where the church meets. This is on the second story of a house outside of Mathura that they rent. They rent this room upstairs. No air conditioning, electricity, as you can probably tell from this, but just open air windows behind us there. Here's the group of the brethren that we assembled with and studied. I don't know if you can find me, pick me out, kind of where's Waldo in that picture. But there's some of the good brethren. Standing right in front of me is Eric. Eric's the preacher there in Mathura. Really good guy. I've grown to love Eric and the work that he does there and the fellowship that we've been able to have together. Now, I want to just give you this other picture. Standing in front of me here now is Eric's son, Priyaleen. Been able to watch Priyaleen grow up in the 8 or 9 years we've been going to Sri Lanka, and Priyaleen holds a wonderful spot in our hearts, just being able to watch him to grow. His English is pretty good. Mom and dad don't speak any English hardly at all, but Priyaleen speaks some English, and so we're able to converse with him without the use of a translator. But the reason I wanted to point out Priyaleen to you, that the second day of our studies, he made the decision to put on Christ in baptism. Here we are walking from where they assemble in this house, walking down the highway toward the Indian Ocean. That's Priyaleen in the back, Eric in the blue, and then Joe in the striped shirt. And so we're walking down to the place where we can get to the Indian Ocean. And they have a good relationship with Joe. Joe comes and studies with them, preaches with them on occasion. And so Priyaleen had made the request that Joe be the one to administer the baptism. It wasn't the smoothest baptism. The surf was a little rough that day, but Joe was able to immerse him for the forgiveness of his sins, again, there in the Indian Ocean. And so it made a wonderful conclusion to our studies there in Mathura. Traveling from where the church meets to where we were staying in our hotel room. One day we took the city bus, very crowded, very unair conditioned, very noisy, smelly bus. But the second day we took the tuk-tuk ride to Mathura. And here we are squeezed in to that tuk-tuk, sometimes 3 of us in the back of that tuk-tuk, but that's the typical ride that we take when we're there in Mathura. After our studies there, we made the trip from Mathura just a little ways up the coast to the city of Gaul. That's about 80-mile journey. Or I'm sorry, about a 30-mile journey. 30-mile journey. Took about 45 minutes to travel from Mathura to Gaul. Sareth, and I'll show you a picture of Sareth here in a minute. Sareth, who is at our preacher study, Sareth preaches there in Gaul. This is Sarah's home. I told you that most of the times the churches just meet in the home, and usually in the preacher's home, and that's certainly the case here. We had studies with some of the brethren, as well as some that they had invited from the community there in Gaul. Again, like every place we go, very attentive to these studies, very interested in the Word of God, and full of questions. I mean, we will study for an hour and then talk for an hour, questions back and forth, back and forth. And so very good studies. Again, much as we talked about in Candy, some of these participants were from the Pentecostal church. And so it was interesting to be able to study with some of them in that way. There's Sareth looking through the gate, and that's his home. And again, where the church meets as well there in Gaul. Here's a Dutch fort, Gaul being on the coast. The island of Sri Lanka was once ruled by the Dutch. And so some of their forts are still there. Here's where we stayed. This is the street down from where we stayed inside that Dutch fort in the city of Gaul. And then we made our way from Gaul back to Colombo. This was the 80-mile trip, about 2.5 hours, because we did it by train. We jumped on the train in Gaul and rode up the coast to Colombo, made it a much quicker journey, that 80-mile trip up the coast. And then we were able to assemble with the church there in Hindala. Now, again, Hindala is where Joe preaches. It's a suburb of Colombo, where the airport is. And here are the brethren assembled on Sunday. Both Ed, that's Ed, of course, in the picture sitting next to Joe. Ed and I both spoke on Sunday, as well as the following day when we had studies. And here we are the next day on Monday, assembled in Joe's home for studies. And again, very attentive, wonderful people. They were certainly kind to us, good hosts and good recipients of the word. And then we spent the night in Colombo and then flew out the next day to make the long trip home. This is the last sunset that we saw in Sri Lanka there in Colombo, overlooking the Indian Ocean, looking back west toward home. And so it was a long trip. It was an arduous trip, but it was a good trip. And I want to again thank Ed and Walcott and Jamari, my traveling companions, for being able to be there with me and assist in the work. And I want to thank the church at South Bumby and all of you who had a part in this work. We were able, and I wasn't able to chronicle all of that. As you might suspect, in a country like this, there's a lot of benevolent needs. And we were able to meet so many of those good benevolent needs because of your kindness and your generosity. But most importantly, we were able to share the gospel. We were able to share the gospel and strengthen and encourage the brethren there, the evangelists who work on that island, and even share the gospel with some of the lost that were there. And so we were so encouraged and so uplifted by the good people that were there. And I'm so thankful for your fellowship and participation in that work. I hope to do that again in the near future, maybe next year or thereafter. But just a wonderful time. And again, thank you so much. This is just, and I know I maybe have bored you with the pictures, but I've got like 100 and 200 more pictures that I could show you. It was hard to filter through and cut them back just to this. But again, thank you so much. Love you so much for your fellowship in the gospel and the work that we did there. And may we continue to encourage and pray for these good brethren for the work that they're doing in the kingdom there in Sri Lanka. Well, thanks for your patience and listening to this report. And again, thanks for your fellowship and prayers for the work that we did there. May God bless you.